My boss called me useless and fired me. He had no idea I was the real owner. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above my head, casting an unforgiving glow over the sterile office space. My fingers trembled as they hovered over the keyboard, each keystroke echoing louder than it should in the cavernous room. The clock on the wall ticked away mercilessly, marking time with a precision that felt almost cruel under the circumstances. It was 3:47 p.m., 47 minutes since Marcus had summoned me to his office for what he called a crucial discussion. Marcus Kensington III, the newly appointed CEO of Kensington Enterprises, sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, his tailored suit perfectly pressed, his cufflinks glinting arrogantly in the afternoon light. His steely blue eyes bore into mine with a mixture of disdain and disappointment, though I couldn't fathom why. "Not yet. You're useless," he declared coldly, leaning back in his leather chair like some self-appointed king passing judgment on a peasant. "Absolutely useless." The words hit me like a freight train, stealing the breath from my lungs and leaving me momentarily speechless. I blinked at him, certain I'd misheard. Surely, this wasn't happening, not here, not now. Not after everything I'd done for this company. "Excuse me." I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed dramatically, as if my very presence exhausted him. "Don't make me repeat myself. You've been nothing but dead weight around here since day one. Your ideas are mediocre at best, your work ethic is laughable, and frankly, I don't see how you've managed to keep a job here for so long." I stared at him, my mind racing to process the venom dripping from his every word. This man, who had only taken over the company 6 months ago, was tearing me apart piece by piece, dismantling years of hard work and dedication in mere seconds. And for what? Because he didn't like my latest presentation? Because someone else whispered something nasty about me during one of their water cooler gossip sessions? "I've reviewed your performance reports," he continued, pulling a thin file folder from his desk drawer and slapping it down between us. "They're abysmal. Frankly, I'm surprised no one fired you before today." I glanced at the folder, its contents spilling out haphazardly across the polished surface of his desk. They were lies, all of them. Fabricated numbers, falsified evaluations, and outright slander disguised as professional critique. Someone had gone to great lengths to ruin me, and I knew exactly who was behind it. But I couldn't say anything. "Not yet." "Effective immediately," Marcus said, standing up and straightening his tie. "You're terminated. Security will escort you out. Please leave your badge and any company property with HR before you go." "Security? Escort me out? As if I were some common criminal caught stealing office supplies?" Rage bubbled beneath my skin, threatening to boil over, but I forced myself to remain calm. Losing control now would only give him more ammunition to use against me. Instead, I rose slowly from my seat, meeting his gaze with a steady resolve that seemed to catch him off guard. For a brief moment, I thought I saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes, but it vanished just as quickly as it appeared. "Fine," I said quietly, my voice laced with quiet authority. "If that's what you want." Without another word, I turned and walked out of his office, ignoring the curious stares of my colleagues as I made my way to HR. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by anger, humiliation, and a burning desire for justice. But beneath all of that simmered something far more dangerous: determination. 2 hours later, I found myself sitting in the driver's seat of my car, staring blankly at the steering wheel. The events of the day replayed in my mind like a broken record, each loop amplifying the injustice of it all. How could Marcus do this? How could he treat me, and everyone else in the company, with such blatant disregard for human decency? Of course, he didn't know the truth. No one did. Not even my closest friends or family members. The secret I'd kept hidden for years, the one that defined my entire existence, remained locked away, buried deep beneath layers of anonymity and discretion. Kensington Enterprises wasn't just some faceless corporation to me. It was my legacy. My father's legacy. And when he passed away unexpectedly 5 years ago, leaving the company in shambles, I made a decision that changed everything. Rather than stepping into the role of CEO, a position I was legally entitled to, I chose to remain anonymous. I wanted to rebuild the company from the ground up, proving to myself and to the world that Kensington Enterprises could thrive without relying on the family name. So I adopted a pseudonym, applied for an entry-level position, and worked tirelessly to climb the ranks based solely on merit. It hadn't been easy. There were days when I questioned my sanity, nights when I cried myself to sleep wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But through sheer grit and perseverance, I clawed my way to the top, or at least close enough to see the finish line. And then Marcus showed up. When my uncle died suddenly, leaving behind a will that named Marcus as his sole heir, none of us saw it coming. Overnight, the man who had spent his entire life living off inherited wealth became the majority shareholder of Kensington Enterprises. Within weeks, he installed himself as CEO, bringing with him a toxic blend of arrogance, entitlement, and incompetence that threatened to undo everything I'd worked so hard to achieve. At first, I tried to reason with him. I offered advice, shared insights, and attempted to guide him toward making sound decisions. But Marcus wasn't interested in listening. To him, I was just another employee, an insignificant cog in the machine he believed he controlled. Now, sitting alone in my car, I realized I'd made a grave miscalculation. By staying in the shadows, I'd allowed Marcus to run roughshod over the company, squandering resources, alienating employees, and tarnishing the reputation we'd fought so hard to restore. Worst of all, I'd let him believe he was untouchable. But no more. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Scrolling through my contacts, I found the number I'd been avoiding for months. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" "It's me," I said, gripping the phone tightly. "We need to talk." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Are you sure? You know what this means." "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "It's time." Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparations, working tirelessly to gather evidence of Marcus's misconduct and rally support from key players within the company. It wasn't easy. Many of my colleagues were too afraid to speak out against him, but slowly, steadily, I began to build a coalition of allies determined to take him down. Meanwhile, Marcus remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. He strutted through the halls of Kensington Enterprises like a peacock, basking in the illusion of power while systematically dismantling everything that made the company great. One evening, as I pored over financial reports late into the night, a soft knock on my apartment door startled me. Setting aside the papers, I crossed the room and opened the door to find Elena, one of my oldest friends and most trusted confidants, standing there with a look of concern etched across her face. "You okay?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You haven't returned any of my calls." "I've been busy," I admitted, closing the door behind her. "Things are complicated right now." Elena raised an eyebrow, taking in the stacks of documents scattered across my dining table. "Complicated doesn't even begin to cover it. What's going on, Claire? You've been acting strange ever since you got fired." I hesitated, torn between keeping my secret and confiding in the one person I trusted implicitly. Finally, I sighed and motioned for her to sit down. "There's something I need to tell you," I began, my heart pounding in my chest. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." For the first time in years, I laid bare the truth about who I really was, the real owner of Kensington Enterprises, the woman who had sacrificed everything to protect the company she loved. Elena listened in stunned silence, her expression shifting from shock to disbelief to admiration as the full weight of my revelation sank in. "And now?" she asked when I finished speaking. "What happens now?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. "Now we fight back." The days that followed were a blur of clandestine meetings, encrypted messages, and late-night strategy sessions. Elena became my right hand, her sharp mind and unshakable loyalty proving invaluable as we pieced together the intricate web of Marcus's misdeeds. With her help, I reached out to other key players within Kensington Enterprises, trusted colleagues who had grown disillusioned with Marcus's leadership and were desperate for change. Among them was Daniel Hopper, the head of our finance department. A man of quiet intensity, Daniel had always been meticulous in his work, documenting every transaction with painstaking detail. When I approached him, he didn't hesitate to share what he knew. Marcus had been siphoning funds from the company into offshore accounts under the guise of consulting fees and marketing expenses. The trail was damning, but it wasn't enough on its own. We needed more, a smoking gun that would expose Marcus once and for all. Then there was Priya Patel, the lead architect of our flagship project, a revolutionary software platform designed to streamline operations across industries. Priya had clashed with Marcus repeatedly over his interference in the project's development, which had led to costly delays and technical setbacks. She handed me a dossier filled with emails and memos showing how Marcus had overridden expert advice, forcing impractical changes that jeopardized the entire initiative. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. But as the evidence mounted, so did the tension. Every whispered conversation felt like walking a tightrope, each step bringing us closer to justice and greater danger. Marcus may have been oblivious to our efforts, but his inner circle wasn't. His personal assistant, a calculating woman named Vanessa, had started sniffing around, asking pointed questions about unusual activity in certain departments. It was only a matter of time before she connected the dots. Despite the mounting pressure, I refused to back down. This wasn't just about reclaiming my position or punishing Marcus for his arrogance. It was about protecting something far bigger than myself. Kensington Enterprises represented decades of hard work, innovation, and sacrifice. My father had built it from nothing, pouring his heart and soul into creating a company that stood for integrity and excellence. I couldn't let Marcus destroy that legacy. One evening, as Elena and I pored over the latest batch of documents in my apartment, she looked up at me with a mix of admiration and concern. "You're really going to do this, aren't you?" she asked softly. "You're going to take him down." I nodded, my jaw set with determination. "I have to. If I don't, no one else will." Elena sighed, running a hand through her hair. "And then what? What happens after you expose him? Are you finally going to step into your role as CEO? Or are you still going to hide behind some fake identity?" Her question caught me off guard. Truthfully, I hadn't thought that far ahead. All my energy had been focused on dismantling Marcus's reign of terror. The idea of stepping into the spotlight terrified me almost as much as facing failure. But deep down, I knew Elena was right. Hiding in the shadows wasn't sustainable, not if I wanted to truly restore the company to its former glory. "I'll cross that bridge when I get to it," I said evasively, though the uncertainty lingered in my voice. Elena gave me a knowing look but didn't press further. Instead, she leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with urgency. "We need to move quickly. Vanessa is getting suspicious, and if she tips off Marcus..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew the consequences. If Marcus discovered our plan, he'd crush us without hesitation, using his wealth and influence to bury the truth forever. The turning point came unexpectedly during a routine board meeting. Marcus had called the emergency session to present yet another harebrained scheme, a proposal to sell off one of our most profitable divisions to fund his pet projects. As usual, he dominated the discussion, dismissing any dissenting opinions with condescending remarks and thinly veiled threats. But this time, things were different. Armed with the evidence we'd gathered, I decided to attend the meeting, not as Claire Bennett, the fired employee, but as myself, Claire Kensington, rightful owner of the company. Walking into the conference room felt surreal. The familiar faces of board members greeted me with polite nods, their expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion. I took my seat at the far end of the table, keeping my presence low-key while Marcus launched into his pitch. Halfway through his presentation, I raised my hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. Marcus frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "Yes?" he snapped, his tone dripping with impatience. "What is it, Ms. Bennett? Didn't HR inform you that you're no longer employed here?" A murmur rippled through the room, but I ignored it, standing up slowly to address the group. "Actually, Mr. Kensington," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, "there's something you should know before proceeding with this proposal." Marcus stared at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "And what might that be?" I met his gaze head-on, letting the weight of my words sink in. "I am Claire Kensington, daughter of Robert Kensington, founder of this company. And according to the terms of my father's will, I hold the majority stake in Kensington Enterprises." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Marcus's face turned pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For the first time since taking over the company, he was utterly speechless. Before he could recover, I placed a thick folder on the table and slid it toward the board members. Inside were copies of the evidence we'd collected, financial records, internal communications, and testimonies from employees detailing Marcus's incompetence and corruption. This document outlines numerous violations committed by Mr. Kensington during his tenure as CEO, I explained, my voice ringing with authority. From embezzlement to gross negligence, these actions have not only harmed the company financially, but also tarnished its reputation. As the majority shareholder, I hereby call for an immediate vote of no confidence. The room exploded into chaos. Board members shouted questions, demanded explanations, and exchanged heated arguments. Marcus, meanwhile, sat frozen in his chair, his arrogant facade crumbling before our eyes. As the debate raged on, I glanced around the room, locking eyes with Elena, Daniel, and Priya. Their nods of encouragement bolstered my resolve, reminding me why I was doing this. This wasn't just about revenge or vindication, it was about restoring hope, rebuilding trust, and ensuring that Kensington Enterprises lived up to its potential. When the dust settled and the votes were cast, the outcome was unanimous. Marcus was stripped of his title, his shares revoked, and a formal investigation launched into his misconduct. As the meeting adjourned, I remained seated, overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just transpired. Elena approached me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Well," she said with a small smile, "looks like you've got your company back." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. "Yeah," I whispered. "Now comes the hard part. Rebuilding Kensington Enterprises wouldn't be easy. There were wounds to heal, relationships to mend, and countless challenges ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose, a renewed belief in the power of perseverance and the importance of staying true to oneself. As I stepped out of the conference room, the weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. The board members lingered behind, their murmurs fading into the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Elena walked beside me, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm that still swirled around us. "You did it," she said softly, breaking the silence. "What happens next?" I exhaled slowly, looking out at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Next? We rebuild. But this time, we do it right." Word spread quickly throughout the company. Employees who had once feared Marcus's wrath now approached me with cautious optimism, sharing stories of how his leadership had stifled creativity and morale. Each conversation fueled my determination to restore not just the business, but also the spirit of innovation and collaboration that defined Kensington Enterprises. Marcus vanished from the public eye almost immediately, retreating to some undisclosed location while lawyers picked apart the wreckage of his schemes. Rumors circulated about lawsuits and settlements, but I didn't care. His downfall was inevitable, a consequence of his own hubris. In the weeks that followed, I took my place as CEO, finally stepping out of the shadows. It wasn't easy. Doubts crept in late at night when the office was empty, and the enormity of the task ahead loomed large. Yet every morning, I reminded myself why I'd fought so hard, for my father's legacy, for the people who believed in me, and for the future of a company I loved. The first order of business was transparency. I held town halls where employees could voice concerns without fear of retribution. I implemented policies to empower teams and reward initiative. Slowly but surely, the culture began to shift. Hope replaced fear, and trust started to take root again. One evening, as I sat alone in my father's old office, the same one Marcus had occupied, I found myself staring at a framed photo of him on the desk. His warm smile seemed to say, "You've got this." A knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Priya stood there, holding a folder. "We finished the revisions on the software platform," she announced proudly. "It's ready for launch." Tears pricked my eyes as I nodded. "Thank you, Priya. For everything." She hesitated, then added, "Your dad would be proud." Those words stayed with me long after she left, echoing in the quiet room. Proud. That was all I ever wanted, to honor the man who had given me this extraordinary opportunity. Months later, Kensington Enterprises unveiled its revitalized brand to the world. The press hailed our comeback story, calling it one of resilience and redemption. But for me, it was more than that. It was proof that integrity and perseverance could overcome even the darkest storms. On the day of the official relaunch event, I stood before hundreds of employees, investors, and journalists, my heart swelling with pride. As I delivered my speech, I made sure to acknowledge everyone who had played a part in this journey, from Daniel and Priya to Elena and countless others whose courage had inspired me. When the applause died down, I ended with a simple promise: Kensington Enterprises will always stand for excellence, innovation, and respect, for our people, our partners, and our purpose. Together, We'll build a legacy that lasts. And as I walked off stage, I knew I had finally fulfilled my destiny, not as Claire Bennett, the fired employee, but as Claire Kensington, the leader who refused to let her company fall.